Today's cardinal lesson, we're talking about trusts in estate planning. And, so a trust, I'm all for it as long as there's a purpose. And we have people come to us that they say, I think I need a trust, or I need a trust, and I need this kind of trust because somebody told me so. And so the first place I'm going, well, what do you want the trust to do for you? What's the purpose? And so I'm just going to give you a little list quickly of what some of the things you could accomplish with a trust is, if you wanted to manage your money and your assets beyond the grave, if you wanted to remove some assets from your estate, if you wanted to avoid publicity, so you didn't want people sticking their nose into whatever assets you had and who you're giving them to, if you wanted to set up future care for yourself or for your heirs, if you wanted to bypass probate, maybe you have a spendthrift in your family that you're worried about them squandering their inheritance and you wanted to set things up so they couldn't do that, and for creditor protection, and there's many more reasons. So I've got Tom Griffith with me today. Tom Griffith, CFP, who's my associate. And when we were talking about this, the topic for today's program, I said to Tom, so what do you think we ought to talk about? Why does this matter?
Yeah, so one of the topics we talk about often are estate planning. And so we have a lot of clients coming in that we're doing financial plans for, and we get on the topic of estate planning. And almost immediately, I'd say about 70% of them bring up, oh, I think I need a trust. And it's to John's point, why do you need a trust? Because a trust isn't always the right answer. And so the thing that we want to cover today is why might you need a trust, and then why might you not need a trust? Because it's a tool. It can do things other things cannot do, but it's not right for everybody. And when used improperly, it can actually cause some unintended consequences. And so we have up here some of the reasons you might need some. And so some examples to get real specific. If you have a special needs child, we use trust all the time to protect them from losing their state benefits. So they're on maybe Medicaid or something like that, where if they were to receive a lot of money as an inheritance, they would lose those benefits, and it's real important for them to keep them. So a trust is wonderful at keeping the money out of that child's name, allowing them to receive the benefits that they need while not jeopardizing and not meaning that they can't be taken care of from the financial assets from the parents. So that is an example where trust can be very helpful. Another example might be second marriages, or you have a marriage late in life and your kids, you want to really protect them with the bulk of that money, but you also know that your spouse, your second spouse, might need that money to be okay in retirement. A trust is a way that you can take care of your spouse if you were to predecease them, while also keeping protection for the kids. And so Hans has a story of a client that he dealt with a couple years ago about them receiving the trust from their parents.
Well, yeah, it's kind of in the unwanted consequences area. So we had this lady who, when her father passed away, these are very wealthy people, and when she inherited from her father, she blew through the money. I mean, she just spent it like crazy, and it was really kind of gone before the mother passed away. And her brothers and sisters had not, they still had their money, but she had blown the father's inheritance. So the mother set up part of her inheritance, or a good part of her inheritance, to be put in this trust where she could only spend the earnings from the trust, and she could not spend the principal of the trust, or she couldn't squander the money. And then, so there would be something left for the grandson, her grandson. And so then the mother passed away. This all came to light. The daughter was very resentful. She was my client, and she was also into where they both had hired lawyers. She had hired lawyers, and her son had hired lawyers to try to end the trust. And they were at odds with each other. And what it really was is she wanted to end the trust because she wanted to get at the money, and she wanted it to live. He wanted the money to stay in the trust, so when she dies, that he would have something there to inherit. And it was just kind of a bad situation that her mother, if she could have ever envisioned this, she would have never done the trust thing in the first place. It had a happy ending where we found a solution and we bought some life insurance inside of the trust to make sure that he was taken care of. And we ended up dissolving the trust and getting her some money, getting him some money. So there are solutions, but I just wanted to point out that a lot of times people set up trusts and they get real specific on some point, some goal they want to accomplish. They use a trust to do it, and then things don't always work out like they planned. So, you know, I want to go back to what we said at the beginning about I'm all for trusts if there's a purpose. And what Tom was talking about in the beginning is a real problem kind of out there for middle class, upper middle class people, where you have these trust mills and you have seminars where they're bringing people into a seminar and they're recommending a trust for everybody. And, you know, so we have people bring those things into us. Some of them bought the trust and they want us to explain it to them, or they didn't buy the trust, but they're convinced they need it, or their brother-in-law went to the seminar, he's convinced they need it, told them about it, and they come into us. And what I'm going to say is it's impossible for 30 people gathered in a room for all 30 of them to need a trust and for all 30 of them to need the same trust. And I'm generally, what these trusts that are coming out of trust mills are addressing is this avoiding probate, bypassing probate. So they've created probate as the bad thing that you want to avoid. And I'm with them on that, is probate can be an ugly process. It takes a long time and it costs money and there's delays, procedures, there's publicity. So, but then where they jump to is we need to put all your assets into a trust now because that way you're going to avoid probate. So we've created this monster of probate and we point it out to people, and then we present the only solution is a trust. And there's other ways to avoid and bypass probate than a trust, and other less expensive ways. So let's talk about what some of those is that, well, the first thing with trusts is they're very expensive to set up. And then they're secondly very expensive to maintain. So when I say very expensive, probably $5,000 to just get a standard basic trust. We have some people we're in association with that can maybe do it for $2,000 to $3,000 in a specific kind of trust. I think if you go to with these sophisticated estate planning attorneys, you're going to pay tens of thousands of dollars for multiple trusts. So they're expensive to set up, and then they're really expensive once they go in effect and we start transferring assets. You got to pay the trustee, you got to pay a custodian. I mean, there's just a lot of expenses. You got to pay taxes within the trust. So, and beneficiary designations, or the thing called transfer on death, TOD, can be used as a replacement to trusts. So, Tom, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. And so oftentimes when we really push the people that came in, they maybe went to a seminar, they might have already created this trust or they're thinking about it, and they really don't know the biggest reason, but you start pushing them some, it does come out that avoiding probate is the main reason they want to do this. They've been taught that probate is bad and it's complicated and timely, and you just want to avoid that. And so, like Hans said, they get them all to put it in the trust. That should not be the only benefit a trust is serving. If that is the only reason you're buying a trust, there are better ways to do that with most of your money. So all financial assets, all IRAs, all 401ks, all bank accounts, all taxable brokerage accounts, you can list either a beneficiary designation or a TOD, which stands for transfer on death, that acts just like a beneficiary designation that sends the money directly to that beneficiary while avoiding probate. So you can do that step while not having to go through a trust. The other problem with the trust on the back end of things is a lot of these people that are not getting them for real sophisticated reasons, just trying to avoid probate, they end up naming one of the kids as the trustee. The kid has no idea what a trustee is. They don't know what a trust is. They don't know how these things work. And so all of a sudden, we fast forward, the parent dies, they go to see who the beneficiary is listed on, and it's listed as the trust. They say, well, what is a trust? And so then they got to go find, was it created, was it not? If it is created, now they got to go open a bank account in the trust name to get the money to transfer there, which the trust ultimately then sends the money to the kids directly anyways. Why have that step in the middle when we can just avoid it altogether by just listing the kids as the beneficiary? And so a reason that you might want to use a trust, back up to this top point, is to manage beyond the grave. And so if you have some real concern that you don't want whoever's receiving that money to get it all at once or right up front, a trust is able to limit their access to the money. And so that is a real reason you might want it, and that why you might want to have that step in between. But if the trust, all it says is we're just going to distribute it to the kids anyways, it doesn't really need to be there to distribute financial assets. The other point I will make is a lot of people who come in, a lot of their retirement money, or most of their money is in retirement accounts, in IRAs, 401ks. Back in 2020, the Secure Act was passed, which really made trusts not very efficient at receiving retirement accounts. And so we can get into the specifics later, but the big takeaway is that trusts are not great places to leave retirement accounts. The bulk of people's money are in retirement accounts. And so if we're listing the trust as a beneficiary, you're really causing problems in the future that you really might not even know about. We had a client come in that had gone to one of these seminars, had about $1 million in an IRA. He had some other money in a taxable account too. And the lawyer was telling him, you need to put all of this in a trust. Well, he came in and said, I want to put this in a trust. He said, well, hold on. You can't put the retirement money into a trust now because it's titled in your name. The only way to get it in the trust is to get it out of your name, pay the taxes, and then put it in the trust. And he was kind of arguing with us about that. He said, well, the lawyer said we need to do this. And we went back and forth. Eventually, he agreed. We showed him the rules and how that worked. And he agreed that he's right. We can't do this. But then just to illustrate the point is a lot of times the lawyers aren't thinking about the logistics of how do we actually do this? What does this actually look like? Now, the retirement accounts, you can name a trust as a beneficiary, but like I said earlier, it's really not a great way to do that.
Well, yeah, you put retirement money, IRA money, you transfer it into a trust right now, that's a distribution. I mean, I remember that guy.
Oh, yeah.
And I sent him back there to that lawyer that just said, okay, tell me how this works. And he really pinned him down on it. And they're just giving general advice. So it sounds a little bit like we're down on trust. We're not down on trust at all. We're down on trust for everybody and one kind of a revocable living trust to avoid probate for everybody. Those generally don't necessarily work out all that well. Okay, but there could be situations where that's called for and our clients want it and we'll help them get it. I'm just, to give another example in closing, I mean, when we have clients that have large amounts of assets and they're facing estate taxes, okay, and so we're trying to figure out either how to pay for them with life insurance or how to avoid some of them, we use all kinds of trusts, including an irrevocable life insurance trust, okay? It's a great way to take the life insurance proceeds out of the person's estate, okay? Or if you're the person we're talking about, is you can gift money to your children under the annual exclusion, and then your children pay the premium on this life insurance, and then it builds up, and then when the life insurance, when you ultimately pass, the death benefit of the life insurance is not included in your taxable estate. I mean, there's so many good uses of trust, so we don't want to be down on them. We just want to say, you go to that word that's on the top is purpose. I need a clear understanding, or you need to demand from me or the guy like me, what is the purpose behind this trust? Why am I going through all these costs and potential pitfalls? What's the underlying purpose? And if you come to us, when we recommend one, we can give that to you very clearly. If you're going to someone else and you want to challenge them, that's what you want to do. And dig a little deeper. What is the real purpose? And as long as it's there, I'm all for it. So I'm Hans Scheil.
I'm Tom Griffith.
And we thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.